So good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
It's great to see you all here. I'm glad we could be out here on another Sunday. As you all know, my name is Orion, and my course is called A Course of Enlightenment, the Human Experience, A Course of Enlightenment. This is going to be lesson number 2, and the subject of this lesson is going to be the dynamic between the spirit and the human. All right, so I'm going to start off by asking the audience if they feel that in their own human experience, they're handling two different natures. It's almost like a balance between light and dark. You know, every moment, everything that occurs in our lives, we're kind of faced with two choices, and that's acting according to what we feel is our lower nature and what we feel is our higher nature. All right, so if I could get the audience to share their impressions, this balance that we have between light and dark, talk about that. Can anybody relate to this?
For me, I definitely feel like I deal on that level.
Mm-hmm.
It's spirit and human. There's a human part of me with its agenda, its own intelligence, its own survival plan, and then there's a spirit part of me with its own intelligence and its own plan of progress.
Right.
And I do, for me, I feel it and experience within myself.
Okay.
Two distinct natures.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I'm going to be talking about that. As I said in the first lesson, I described the human experience as a temporary synthesis of these two contrary opposing elements. We have the spirit and we have the human. Okay, so these are two components that produce our human experience. All right, so now I'm going to start off with the recap. What I talked about in lesson 1. Basically, it was us as entities. We are a part of a creative consciousness. Okay, we're creating on many different levels in this universe, and we are just smaller versions of that universal consciousness that created the galaxies, the planets, the stars, and we're creating on a much smaller scale, similar to the scale of our cells within our body. Okay, we are just cells in the body of the universe, co-creating together this experience of being in one universe. Okay, so I also talked about the I am presence. Now, I use the I am presence synonymously with and interchangeably with the spirit. Okay, there's no difference, there's no distinction, they're just different names for the same thing. All right, and I also talked about the tools that consciousness has available to create its reality, which is light, and light is a consequence of love. Okay, now light has both intelligent and energetic properties. It has the intelligent property to take on whatever form consciousness has willed it to be, and it's such a high vibration that it translates into the human experience as love. Okay? So, the human and the spirit. All right, see, these are the two elements that create our human experience. So I'm going to make some distinctions. I'm going to talk about how we experience and we interpret these two things within our human experience. This is going to be the topic of the day. Okay? So I'm going to start off by saying the spirit. Okay? This is a spiritual. This is our spiritual beingness. This is our spiritual entity. Okay, this is a non-material thing. Okay, basically, as I said before, this is the I am presence. Okay, don't ever think that you can touch this, actually feel this with your body. You can only feel it within you and around you. Okay, it's this light that radiates life. It's just pure life essence within you. Okay, now the human is a material. Okay, it's composed of matter. All right, it itself is an inanimate object. Okay, spirit animates it. Now we can obviously see that with physical death. Okay, our bodies may be matter, but they just don't exist until a spirit comes down and is embodied within this vehicle. Okay, so our spirit resonates on a pure vibration of love. Okay, so I'm going to branch off into just talking about the spirit for now, and then I'm going to talk about these two together. Okay, so our spirit resides always on the spiritual planes. This is a place of pure love, harmony. There's no discord. It's complete order. Okay, it's the most harmonious, peaceful, and free state that you can exist. All right. Now, the creation of the experience of reality is much different for the spirit in its native environment than it is in the human experience as we experience it right now. Okay? For spirit to have an experience, all it must do is imagine a thing, and then it instantly actualizes because it resonates on that pure vibration of love. All right? For those who aren't here, why is love so powerful? Love and light are two interchangeable concepts. They're both referring to the same thing. Our universe is composed of all light, okay? Even matter itself is just densified light, the way that an ice cube is densified water. Okay? So, what creates light? Where does it come from? Why is it? Light is a product of love. Love is a vibration, and that translates into our experience as love is the highest vibration there is, pure love, and that translates into our human experience as this light that just emanates. Okay, now this is this resource that sustains our life. Okay, so spirit, the I Am presence, it goes by many names. People have called it many things. People have called it the Holy Spirit. People have called it God, this and that. I'm not going to go through all the names, but essentially they're all referring to spirit, or the same one thing. We're talking about the same one thing. All right? So each spirit vibrates on its own, has its own vibrational signature. Okay? Your spirit is so unique. It is it is nothing in existence is identical to your spirit. It is completely unique. It has its own resonance. It has its own vibrational frequency. It has its own rhythm. It has its own cadence. It has its own color. All right, and it's unlike anything in existence. Each aspect of existence is unique in its own right. Okay, because we're all aspects of the same one thing. Okay. Now, as I said, the experience that spirit has in its native realm is very different from the experience that we have in the material realms. All right, but one of the main differences is that spirit cannot perceive any part of its experience as being separate from the source. Okay, it always knows. It's in a state of all knowingness. Okay, it's like being plugged into the internet. It has all the information in the universe available to it, and it's only just a matter of attention. All right, it's like a video game. Let's say all the data on the video game is contained on the disk, right? And you put it in your TV, you put it in the video game system, and you access small parts of that information. But it's all available to you at the same time. Well, spirit knows this, so that's why it can create any experience that it wants. All right? So, spirit then, from this state of eternal perfection, from this state of complete harmony, says, you know, this is great. And since I know I'll be in this state forever, I'm going to experience something else. I'm going to go down to the material planes. I'm going to have the human experience. Okay? Now, the human experience is so unique because it creates the opportunity to experience that which is not the truth. Okay? We already know that the truth is love and harmony and peace and freedom, prosperity, abundance. That's how it will always be because our spirit is a multi-dimensional being. It exists on many planes of life. Okay? So it says, I want to come down there, I want to have a human experience. Okay? So, we're going to talk about the human. Alright? Now, the human operates from a pure vibration of fear. Okay? Now, I'm gonna talk about these two relationships right here. Spirit just vibrates on a pure vibration of love because that is the force that created the universe. All right? The human vibrates on a vibration of fear. Why? Why does fear even exist? Okay? The human needs fear. Fear is actually a good thing. Okay? Fear is like a program that's installed in the human, and its purpose is to perpetuate its survival. Okay? We were once hunter-gatherers, and we had to go live out there in the wilderness and, fend off against nature and all these other kind of things. And if we didn't have fear, we wouldn't be here today. If it wasn't for the fear that was instilled in our ancestors, that fear for survival. Okay? So we have these two distinct natures. Okay, now the spirit is immortal. Alright, the human is mortal. Alright, spirit is aware of its immortality. It can never fear anything because it knows that it always is and it will always be. Okay, but the human, on the other hand, from its sensory perceptions, it perceives, it is believed to be mortal. All right, it feels that it is mortal, which is why it needs this fear program in order to perpetuate its material existence. Okay? Now, the primary concern of spirit is creative self-expression. All right? Creative self-expression is the primary concern of spirit. All right? Now, the primary concern of the human is survival. Okay? The human lives in the past and the future. The spirit only lives in the now moment. Okay? Whenever you feel like you're just immersed in the now moment, whenever you feel, like you're doing something, that makes you happy, that brings you fulfillment, you always kind of lose your sense of past and future. You just immerse yourself in the now moment. It could be being with someone that you enjoy being around. It could be doing something that you love to do. But usually when people are in some sort of state that makes them feel love, they lose all sense of past and future and they start living in the now moment. And I don't think there's a better example than this than children. Children are the people who have had the most recent exposure to this spiritual environment. All right, they come down here, and it's so clear. Our spiritual nature is so clear when we interact with them because it's like they're always high off life. They don't need anything really. They don't need anything to be happy. I have a child myself, so I'm speaking from actual experience. All right. So we have two very, very, very contrary natures, as you all can see. Okay. Now, the spirit has a propensity to creation. All right. The human, since its mentality is based in survival, it has this it develops this survival of the fittest mentality. All right. Now that has produced a lot of competition, and basically, its nature is destruction. Now, everybody may not think that, but as I mentioned earlier, in the human experience, it seems like we're handling two different natures. Okay, it's like it's like we're handling the light and the dark. Every event or anything that occurs in our life, at this age, we know that there's kind of two different ways to react to a situation. You could either spaz out and just go ham, or you could go with your higher nature. And although things may not, be resolved exactly the way you want, you leave with that peace of mind. You leave knowing that you stay true to who you really are. Okay? So, our spirit, like I said, its primary concern is creative self-expression. All right? It lives in imagination. Okay? And the human lives in its sensory perceptions. very different. So like I said, the spirit can automatically just imagine a thing and then actualize it into experience because it resonates on such a high vibration. Okay? But the human, the experience is very different. We have our sensory perceptions. And when we think about our sensory perceptions, we can only perceive a very small, narrow, space of everything that is. For instance, we only perceive a small, portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. The human ear can only hear a certain range of frequencies. It's obvious that there is more beyond our sensory perceptions. Okay? But the human lives according to its sensory perceptions. It knows nothing beyond the sensory perceptions. Okay? So the human responds, the human is a reactive animal. It reacts to what is perceived. Okay, the spirit is a responsive entity. Okay? And it responds to what is known. Okay? Now, I love talking about this because I have to deal with it. I have to deal with this in my daily life. For instance, if something unfavorable happens or if something that I just didn't anticipate occurs or somebody's starting to spaz out or whatever situation I find myself in, I could either react to what I know, I could either respond by what I know, and what I know that, all people are one. All people, we're all one thing. And what you do to another, you do to yourself. Okay? Or you could just react by what you perceive. You could be like, well, he said this to me, and I just went off, or this and that, that reactive impulse is from the human. All right, now what I'm trying to get everybody to do here is be able to understand these two different natures, understand what feelings and what thoughts, what actions are coming from what. Is it coming from your spirit, or is it coming from your human? All right? Because we're all here on our own individual pursuit of happiness. That's why we're here, right? Well, the thing is, being the human is never going to make you happy. It's never going to make you fulfilled. All right, now I'm not trying to tell you what's going to make you fulfilled, but this type of material lifestyle, we've been engaged in it for a very long time throughout many incarnations. Okay? And the people who are most fulfilled in our society are people who have heeded the spirit. This produces peace right here. This is why we are at war. This is why there has been so much war that has occurred in society. There's been so much destruction. Okay? Now, our spirit is our authentic self. Okay? The human has the ego, or the false self. Okay, so we handle these two things, these two natures within our mind. Okay. Now, since this is our true nature, it produces clarity. The more we yield to our spiritual nature, the more clear things become. The more you start to see the truth, the more you realize the truth. But the more you think in terms of the human, the more thoughts, words, and deeds that you act on that coincide with the human nature, it produces disillusion. Okay? The human operates from a very limited state of awareness. Okay? And it has an intellectual mind. Okay, that uses rationality and logic. All right. The spirit has an intuitive mind that uses imagination and intuition. Okay? Okay, so we're going to talk about the human. Like I said, the human operates in its reality based off of its sensory perceptions. Okay? And what your sensory perceptions are going to tell you is essentially a lie. It's going to tell you, yes, we're all. It's going to appear as if we're separate, but the spirit knows we're already one. Okay. Our ego is basically a summary of all the sensory perceptions that have told us, that have reinforced this notion of separation and falsity. But I'm not hating on the human, because this, like I said, this is a vehicle. The human is a vehicle for the spirit to have a physical experience. Okay? The human can be trained. All right? Essentially that's what we're all seeking to do when we say, yes, we're going to go raise our vibration. The only thing that we can raise our vibration toward is the spirit. Okay? We get more in alignment with the spirit, because as I said last lesson, every movement, every time you raise your vibration, that's a movement toward love. So if love was on this end of the wall and I was on this end of the wall, moving toward it would be raising my vibration. This is equivalent to what enlightenment is. It's a step-by-step process that we go to in order to finally achieve that ultimate, that sufficient amount of love that allows us to transcend these restrictive dimensions. All right. So, as I mentioned before, it's really clear how our spiritual nature is within children. Okay. And like I said, it lives in a constant state of imagination. All right. So, I'm going to associate imagination with wonder. All right. It lives in a constant state of wonder. The human, on the other hand, lives in a constant state of worry. Because it's worried about its survival. It's worried about how it's going to eat. It's worried about how it's going to provide for its family. It's worrying. I think all of us could relate to that. There's some things that may have happened in our lives that have caused us to worry about something. And through that, it's obvious that worrying about a thing when you can't do anything about it never really solves anything. All right. Now, the human is always in a state of worry because it's insecure. It's insecure about how it's going to provide for itself. It's uncertain about how it's going to make ends meet. But the spirit is always certain and insecure. All right. The human needs to accumulate material goods and possessions in order to perpetuate its survival. All right. We have to do it with food. We have to do it with all the materials that we use to make our lives more convenient. But the spirit, it doesn't need anything. All it needs is love. It's self-sufficient on its own right. Okay. All right. So the spirit in nature is a cooperative being. Its nature is cooperative, and the humans is competitive. All right. Now, I'm gonna take a break from the explanation, but I want the audience to see how, these two, what we thought was, part of just our experience is really two different things. We have two different elements. We have the human element and we have the spirit element. Okay. And as I mentioned in the last lesson, we're all here to possibly create that change. We're here to improve our lives in some way, right? If we want an improvement in our life, we want the spirit. We basically want more spirit. We want more love. Our pursuit of happiness is equivalent to the pursuit of love. Okay? You can't have happiness without some degree of love. Just as you can't have freedom without some degree of love. Love is really a conglomerate word for a lot of experiences like joy and happiness and peace and freedom, abundance, because you can't have any of those experiences without the experience of love. Okay. So I want to help the audience discern between these two different natures, because as we do that, we become more choosy. We empower ourselves with more choice. You know, we say, okay, I could act like the human. I could act according to my human nature. I could just punch this dude in the face. You know what I'm saying? Or you can say, you know what? I know that by punching this guy in his face, I'm putting out some I'm creating a cause that's going to have some effect in the future. Okay? Because I know what I do to another, I do to myself. So therefore, I'm all about the peace. You know? And it may be hard at the time we have to make some decisions like that, but at the end of the day, like I said, all things have a cause and effect relationship. So the more we act on our spirit, the more we empower ourselves to create as spirit does. All right, we're all here to create a certain change, right? We're all here because we want fulfillment. You know, we're all here because we are pursuing happiness in some way or fashion. All right. So, good time. All right, so I'm going to talk about the human and the experience of the human in our particular lives. Okay, we've been conditioned to identify more with being a human being than being a spiritual being. Okay. We've been basically conditioned into a society that says, yeah, we're human beings and we got the light and the darkness and we got a whole mixture thing going on and you can't have all light, you know, blah, blah. But the paradigm that we are now moving into, we are identifying with the notion that we are spiritual beings having a human experience rather than just human beings who are having a spiritual experience. Okay? And this whole movement toward this knowledge is enlightening us and is enabling us to create that better change, to become more effective creators as our roles as creative consciousness. Okay? So throughout our human experience, I'm gonna say there's a ratio. Okay, now if I believe in reincarnation. And one thing I know about physics is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. All right? So the energy that's inherent in the universe is just always changing forms. So I don't believe in the actual concept of death. I just believe in a transitional phase, a transition, you know. So I look at death as a transition from a material life to a spiritual life. Okay? So when you believe in reincarnation, when I started to accept reincarnation, it made me question what was the purpose behind life. You know, why are we constantly coming down here and engaging in these human experiences? What is the purpose behind it? What is the intention behind it, this human experience? All right. So I kind of look at things as a ratio. Okay. I haven't met anybody who identifies with all of this. I haven't met anybody who has embodied all of these things, just as I haven't met anybody who has embodied any of these things completely, okay? But we have a ratio. So let's say there's like a ratio, okay? We have like, let's say we could have a 30% and a 70% ratio, okay? Each human experience, each action that we have is like, it's like a test. What are we gonna react on? So throughout our human experience, we have like a ratio of spiritual, human, you know, energies, okay? And our lifetime is meant to be a progression, you know, a movement from what, 30%, you know, spiritual energy to 70%, you know, human. And let's say your next lifetime is going to be 50-50. You know, but we constantly go throughout this human experience in order to integrate these spiritual energies, to embody this spiritual light in the human form. Okay, and that's why I call this course, this class, the human experience, a course of enlightenment, because essentially what each and every human experience is its own particular journey. It's its own path, you know, just like a, you know, ship sails a course. Each one each person is having a human experience. We're all experiencing the same thing, but we're just experiencing it in different ways. So I look at the human experience as a course of enlightenment because I feel that is the purpose behind all of this. We are here to integrate these spiritual energies into the human form and ultimately bring about heaven on earth. Okay? Now, spirit and human, they come together and they form what we call mind, body, spirit. Okay, now this whole chart right here is basically a map of your mind. Okay? The spirit is always going to be a spirit. It's always going to be a non-material thing, right? The body is always going to be a material thing. But the mind is where the two natures of both come and play on the equal playing fields. Okay, so you have it's like a butler comes and has a dish. He says, "Hey, do you want some of this or do you want some of that? Do you want the human or do you want the spirit?" Essentially, that's what it is. We have the capacity to choose between both. Okay, and it is this choice that could either hold us in bondage or deliver us into freedom. Okay, so I look at our world today and I see that more than ever we're more spiritual. We identify as spiritual beings more than ever before. All right. I associate the human with basically as being responsible for all the things that we find unfavorable, all the acts of destruction and discord. And yes, so it's responsible for all the destruction, acts of discord, basically everything that's wrong with the world. But the time that we live in now is better than ever before. Okay, where, like I said, we're identifying more as spiritual beings, and this is changing the whole landscape of our experience. All right. So right now, I want to encourage the audience to kind of share their assessment of the human experience. I want to know what you all are thinking, because this isn't supposed to be a class, it's just pure lecture. I want to facilitate discussions. I want to evoke thought about the human experience. And I think it would be great to understand how you all had to deal with both of these contrary natures in your own human experience. So if anybody would like to share any of their experiences, recent or past, now would be the time. Or if anybody has any questions.
Well, for me, sometimes I am constantly seeking to balance between the demands of the human experience, as far as I have my spiritual goals, and my spiritual is my ideal. I want to be more identified with that spiritual part of me, but yet the human part of me has its demands and its requirements. Mm-hmm. So it's like, how do I balance out? Like, how do I? Because if I don't respond to the human part of me, then how do I exist where I can continue to evolve into that spiritual part of me?
Right.
And that's been recently, right now, where I'm at, is trying to, in my human experience, is how do I respond as the spirit is my goal, but remember that the human part of me is a fact.
Right. And see, that's the thing that's unique about the human experience. We have to, we can't just say, yeah, I'm not going to go into that, but we say, oh, I'm a spiritual being and I'm a human being. I'm a non-material being and I'm a material being. I have to provide for my material needs and my spiritual needs. And more often than not, those material needs have always kind of trumped the spiritual needs, because like I said, the human only knows what it perceives. Okay? So it really is a very, very, very unique thing that we have going on. And the thing that differentiates the human experience from just the experience of, spirit in its native environment is that when the spirit comes down into the human experience, it has the opportunity to identify with that which it is not. It has the opportunity to to experience that which is less than perfection. Okay? And all of these things are basically less than perfection. And the Spirit is pure perfection. It resides on multi-dimensions and complete harmony and order, and it's already it knows everything that it's already going to know. Okay? So, like I said, the mind is where these two things come together. All right, it processes that incoming data of your reality, and you say, how am I going to react to this? How am I going to respond to this? Okay? So, yeah, so with these two possibilities, we have an infinite variety of experiences to choose from. All right? And we have been doing that throughout the ages. We've been choosing so many experiences. But now, like I said, we've reached a time where we're no longer really, we're starting to disassociate ourselves as human beings and realize ourselves as spiritual beings. And what Adam said earlier, he said that we're often faced with having to provide for our physical needs. So how do you make this transition? Okay. Well, as I said, the Spirit resonates on a pure vibration of love, and the human on fear. So I'm gonna put faith right here. Okay. Now the Spirit doesn't need faith. It doesn't have faith. It already knows what it is. It already knows. It's completely certain that it can do what it does. Okay. And that's why it vibrates on a pure vibration of love, because it knows instantly that it can create whatever change that it needs to. Okay. Now the human operates off fear. So essentially what I'm saying is we need to get rid of this fear mentality that we've been indoctrinated into. Okay, get rid of that fear. Realize that it doesn't serve you anymore. It does nothing but hold you back. Okay, you can live as a spiritual being. Okay, the thing about being a spiritual being is the universe is going to support you in doing that, because that is your true identity. The universe wants you to be your authentic self, so it's going to support you. Okay, you don't have to worry about, how am I going to provide, blah blah. It's got that. It's already stored in the CD. It's already there. The possibilities already exist. All you need is faith. Now, this is beyond faith. This is knowingness. Okay? And when I talk about knowingness, think about it like this. When you know something, you know that a car is going to get you from point A to point B. You know that when you hit the power button on your TV, it's going to turn on, right? And you're absolutely certain about that, right? There's absolutely no doubt in your mind when you flip that light switch and the light comes on. It's that same kind of certainty. It's that same kind of knowingness that Spirit has. Okay? It knows that it can do whatever it pleases. It's only the human mind in you that thinks that it's insufficient. It's only the human mind in you that thinks that it doesn't have enough to create what it desires. All right? So I encourage the audience to maybe take a piece of paper out and make a self-assessment. See which of these two elements they allow to influence their lives. All right, because this is very important. If you want to create that improvement, it's all right here. Live in the now moment, creative self-expression, imagine, respond by what you know rather than what you perceive. Be your true self, be your authentic self. Because like I said, each soul has a energy signature, that's unique to its own. And with that being said, since it's unlike anything else, the universe is going to support it being its authentic self, because that's its natural, inherent state. So, in the human experience, essentially what we're faced with is integrating these being spiritual beings within this human vessel. All right. So, with that said, does anybody have any questions? EJ. Anybody anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I do want to say that I love when you say the universe supports you. Because when I think of the universe, I think of the plants and the animals and the trees and like, you know, everybody. And so in my mind, the picture that I get is like everybody and everything that exists and ever existed, every ghost, every dead guy, you know, is conspiring to support me. And
Right.
it gives me that sense of importance and of love that I think we should all walk around with every day. So I really appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, you know, the universe completely supports you in being who you are. You weren't put here to be who you weren't. You know, you were here to have a choice between choosing who you're not and who you really are. That's what the human experience is about. See, in the spiritual planes, spirit's natural environment, it just is. It's its true self. It resonates on such a high frequency that it can't be anything that it is not. So it comes down here into the human experience to say, hey, I have a choice between imperfection and perfection. Now, everything's always in an eternal state of perfection, so the appearance of imperfection is really just an illusion. But it's still an experience nonetheless. Okay? So we have, if you leave with anything today, you know that you have a choice. We're constantly always in the act of balancing these two natures, the human and the spirit. And the more we act on the human, the more we densify ourselves, the more we lower our vibration, the more destructive things become, the more chaotic things become. But the more you influence yourself with the spirit, it creates the opposite effect. It raises your vibration. It gives you toward love. It helps you facilitate other people. It, unlocks your imagination. It empowers your true power. And it makes you realize your true, inherent, authentic self. See, the ego is only something that's particular to this particular lifetime. All right. Once this lifetime is done, the ego is gone. But your authentic, true self is the eternal you. It's the you that has always existed. It's the you that will always exist. And like I said, and it's an immortal being. Okay, it is an immortal being. All right. So leave with. You are not human. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. This is just a vehicle. You don't get in a car and you say, "Oh, I'm an Altima." You don't misconstrue that. You don't say, "Oh, since I've entered this car, I'm now this car." No, you say, "I'm a person driving this car," and it's the same thing as a spirit. I'm a spirit driving this human. Okay, like I said, spirit lives. The human lives in the past and the future. Okay, and this is equivalent to driving with your, only looking at your rearview mirror. And this is equivalent to, basically just keeping...
I was going to say being concerned about things that haven't happened yet. Exactly.
That anxiety that can arise. But the spirit lives in the now moment. Okay, that is where all life is lived. That's where all creation happens. All right, so... that concludes my talk. Does anybody have any questions? Would anybody like to share any of their experiences of how they handle these two different natures, these two different elements of the human experience, how they balanced it? And does anybody have any stories, any insights?
Yeah, it's a practice.
It is.
It's a practice because to be a blended being takes a knowing, like what you mentioned. I have watched, since I've been more in touch with my God self, I've watched myself and other people create situations. I watched a gentleman yesterday create a situation. He woke up angry about something that he had to do for work, and his whole day just completely, it kind of spiraled. And he was complaining about having to go and pick up his paycheck. And he didn't know the exact location of where to pick up his paycheck. It was his first time picking up his paycheck. He didn't know exactly where it was. And he got so upset that he threatened to quit his job. And I said, "Are you telling me that you're going to have to find a check every single day in an undisclosed location? Like, this is temporary. Don't act like this is going to happen forever and ever. I just talked to you yesterday and you said you loved your job." And today, because of one incident, you're about to make a life-changing decision.
Mm-hmm.
And it snapped him back. You know, it snapped his brain back into like, oh, you're right. You know, but for a second, that just him waking up grumpy was about to change the course of his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mhm.
and I there's a part of me that wanted to. It was kind of like watching a train collide and not being able to do anything about it, because I don't want to. This is my son I'm talking about, and I avoid asserting into his experience.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he did ask my opinion, and so I gave it to him, and I was able to snap him back into the present and say, you have your paycheck, you enjoyed the job just yesterday.
Mhm.
Just yesterday, you were lamenting, going on and on and on about how it was such easy work and such great pay, and because you woke up on the wrong foot, I didn't get enough sleep, now I gotta get up, I don't know where to go, you were about to completely change the course of your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mhm.
and that was the human, the third dimensional mind taking over, the ego taking over,
Yes.
because it was uncomfortable with not knowing. But do we ever know? We never really know. We think we know.
Mm-hmm.
We think we know. Spirit knows,